Imagine standing at the altar, looking into the eyes of the person you love, vowing to stand by them through thick and thin. The future feels limitless, built on promises of loyalty, trust, and forever. But what if forever was just an illusion? What if, before the ink on your marriage certificate had even dried, you uncovered a truth so devastating it shattered everything you thought you knew? What would you do if betrayal wasn't years in the making, but just days? Infidelity? A word that carries weight heavier than most. Studies show that nearly 20% of married individuals admit to stepping outside their vows at some point in their relationship. But here's something even more unsettling. Some don't even wait. The honeymoon phase, that blissful period of laughter, intimacy, and new beginnings, isn't always what it seems. For some, it's just a mirage, masking secrets that were never meant to be found. Picture this. The wedding photos are still being edited, the gifts remain unopened, and the scent of the bouquet lingers in the air. Then, with a single message, a misplaced receipt, or an unexpected whisper, the truth comes crashing down. The person you just pledged your life to, already unfaithful. How does a heart process that kind of betrayal? How do you even begin to comprehend the reality that the love story you believed in was rewritten behind your back before it even truly began? Tonight, we step into the world of those who lived this nightmare. Stories of love turned to deception in record time, of trust broken before it had a chance to solidify. This isn't just about cheating, it's about what happens when the fairy tale crumbles before the first chapter is even complete. For Helen and Samuel, their wedding was nothing short of magical. Friends and family gathered under a sky laced with golden hues, raising their glasses to love, to commitment, to a future filled with endless possibilities. The vows were exchanged with trembling hands and teary eyes, words wrapped in sincerity. Forever had never felt so real, but what no one knew, not Helen, not their guests, not even Samuel himself, was that this beautiful beginning would unravel into something unimaginable in just 3 days. The morning after the wedding, they boarded a flight to their honeymoon destination, a secluded beach resort where the waves whispered promises of peace and romance. Hand in hand, they checked into a luxurious villa, their initials embroidered on plush robes waiting inside. Everything seemed perfect, or at least that's what Samuel thought. But sometimes perfection is nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion, one that shatters the moment you see the cracks. It was on the third night, as Samuel scrolled through his phone, that he noticed something strange. A message notification flickered across Helen's screen, one that she hurriedly swiped away. A single moment, so small, so fleeting, yet it planted something in Samuel's mind. Doubt. He didn't say anything at first. He wanted to believe there was nothing to it. But as Helen stepped into the shower, leaving her phone unattended for the first time that evening, the temptation was unbearable. With trembling fingers, he unlocked the device, a password he had watched her enter 100 times before. What he saw next stole the breath from his lungs. A text conversation, not just any conversation, one with another man, and not just any man, her ex. A thread of messages filled with words that made his blood run cold. "I miss you. I can't stop thinking about our last night together. I wish I was there instead." The timestamps told him everything he needed to know. These weren't old messages. These were sent the night before their wedding. And worse, Helen had responded. "Soon," she had written, "I just need to figure things out." Samuel sat frozen, the phone slipping from his grasp onto the hotel bed. His chest tightened, his pulse hammered in his ears. His wife, his new wife, had been unfaithful before they had even signed the papers. and she had every intention of continuing it. In that moment, something inside him changed. The man who had stood at the altar, filled with love and devotion, was gone. In his place, a storm was distilling. Because some betrayals aren't just forgiven, some require something else entirely. Samuel sat in silence, staring at the phone screen, the words burning into his mind. His stomach twisted in a way he had never felt before, a sickening blend of rage, heartbreak, and something darker. It was surreal. Just days ago, he had been holding Helen's hands, slipping a ring onto her finger, believing he was the luckiest man alive. And now? Now he was nothing more than a fool. A man who had given his entire heart to someone who had been lying to him from the start. His first instinct was denial. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe he was misinterpreting the messages, but deep down, he knew better. The timestamps didn't lie. The words didn't lie. Helen had been in someone else's arms while he had been picking out their wedding bands, making plans for forever. And the worst part? She hadn't even ended it. Soon. That single word echoed in his mind over and over. She had been waiting for the right moment to tell him, to figure things out. What did that even mean? That their marriage was a placeholder? That he was nothing more than a safety net while she decided if she still wanted someone else? Samuel clenched his jaw, his fingers curling into fists. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat, rapid and unsteady. He wanted to wake her up, to demand answers, to watch her squirm under the weight of her own lies. But he didn't. No, he wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a confrontation, not yet. Because now this wasn't just about betrayal, it was about control, about power. And Helen had stolen his on their wedding night, without him even knowing. He sat there for hours, unmoving, replaying every moment of their time together. The way she had kissed him at the altar, how she had whispered, "I love you," as they shared their first dance. The laughter, the stolen glances, the warmth of her touch. It had all been a lie, and yet she had looked so sincere. How? How could she fake it so well? Had he ever even known her, or had he just fallen in love with the version of her she wanted him to see? With each passing second, a new thought surfaced, one far more dangerous than the last. If Helen could lie so effortlessly, if she could stand beside him in front of their family and friends and pretend she was his forever, then she was capable of much more. If she could betray him before their marriage had even begun, then what was stopping her from doing it again? How many more lies had she told? Was their entire relationship built on deception? And then came the most dangerous question of all. What was he supposed to do about it? Forgiveness was not an option. Walking away would mean she had won, that she had taken his love, his dignity, and left him with nothing. But revenge was something else entirely. And in that moment, Samuel made a decision, one that would change both of their lives forever. To understand Samuel's reaction, you have to understand the love story that came before it. Because for him, Helen wasn't just a woman, she was the woman, the one who made him believe in fate, in soulmates, in the kind of love that could withstand anything. He had met her 3 years ago at a coffee shop, one of those accidental encounters that feel scripted by the universe. She had been in line ahead of him, fumbling for change in her purse, when he had stepped forward and paid for her drink without a second thought. She had laughed, thanked him, and insisted on paying him back by joining him at his table. That was the moment it all began. From the start, Helen had been mesmerizing, her laughter infectious, her presence magnetic. She had a way of making Samuel feel like he was the only man in the room, the only one who mattered. Their connection had been effortless, a spark that never seemed to fade. late-night conversations, spontaneous road trips, whispered secrets under the covers. Every moment with her felt like something out of a storybook. He had never questioned her love, never doubted that she was meant to be his forever. But maybe, just maybe, the signs had always been there. Looking back, Samuel could recall small things, moments that seemed insignificant at the time, but now painted a different picture. The nights she wouldn't answer his calls, claiming she had fallen asleep early. The way she sometimes seemed distant, lost in thoughts she never shared. The ex she never talked about, the one whose name was only mentioned in passing, but never with full closure. And yet, he had never pushed, never questioned. Love, after all, was built on trust. And so when he proposed, it hadn't been with hesitation, it had been with certainty. He had planned everything perfectly. The romantic getaway, the candlelit dinner, the heartfelt speech he had rehearsed a dozen times in his head. When he got down on one knee and asked Helen to be his wife, she had gasped, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. And then she had said yes, without hesitation, without doubt. In that moment, Samuel had been the happiest man alive. Their wedding had been a dream, an intimate ceremony filled with the people they loved most. Samuel had watched Helen walk down the aisle, breathtaking in white, and thought to himself that this was the start of something beautiful. The vows they exchanged had felt sacred, real. And when she had kissed him in front of everyone, pressing her body against his as the crowd erupted in applause, he had never felt more certain that he had made the right choice. But now, sitting in their honeymoon suite, staring at the undeniable truth in front of him, Samuel felt like a man who had been led straight to the edge of a cliff, only to be shoved off without warning. The betrayal wasn't just about the act itself. It wasn't just about the messages or the fact that Helen had been unfaithful before the ink had even dried on their marriage certificate. It was about the lie, the fact that she had stood in front of him, in front of everyone they loved and promised a future she had never truly intended to keep. It was about the stolen moments, the whispered I love yous that now felt hollow. It was about the realization that while he had been giving his whole heart, she had been keeping pieces of hers hidden away, reserved for someone else. And that was the thing about betrayal. It didn't just break a person, it changed them. Samuel wasn't the same man who had stood at the altar just days ago, hopeful and blind. That version of him was gone. What remained now was something different, someone different. And for the first time, he wasn't thinking about how to fix things, he was thinking about how to even the score. Samuel didn't confront Helen that night. He didn't wake her up, didn't throw accusations, and didn't demand the truth. No, he let her sleep peacefully beside him, unaware that the man she had just vowed to spend forever with was no longer the same. His mind had already moved past heartbreak, past sorrow, past disbelief. Now there was only purpose. And that purpose was clear. By morning, he had a plan. Helen woke to the scent of fresh coffee and the sound of waves crashing outside their villa. Samuel greeted her with a warm smile, a soft kiss on the forehead, and the suggestion of a perfect day, a private boat ride, just the two of them, out into the open ocean where they could be alone, away from the world. She smiled at the idea, stretching lazily beneath the sheets, completely unaware of the storm distilling beneath his calm exterior. The day unfolded like something out of a fantasy. Helen laughed, completely at ease, snapping pictures of the endless blue horizon as their boat cut through the waves. Samuel watched her, studying every detail, the way she tilted her head when the wind caught her hair, the way she bit her lip when she smiled. It was strange, he thought, how someone could look so innocent, so pure, and yet be capable of such deep betrayal. But innocence was just a disguise, and today it would crumble. They were miles from the shore when Samuel finally spoke. "I know," he said, his voice eerily calm. Helen turned, confused. "Know what?" she asked, her laughter fading as she saw the look in his eyes. "About you, about him, about what you did before the wedding," Samuel continued, his voice steady, his gaze unyielding. She froze. Her fingers tightened around the railing of the boat, her mind scrambling for an explanation, an excuse, anything that might save her. But there was no point in lying now. The mask had slipped. "Samuel, Don't—" The word cut through the air like a blade, sharp and final. He stepped closer, watching, as panic flickered across her face. She opened her mouth again, maybe to plead, maybe to confess, but he didn't care. Words were useless now. What mattered was action. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was already open to her messages, the ones she thought had remained hidden. With one swift motion, he tossed it overboard. Helen gasped, watching as it disappeared beneath the waves, sinking into the abyss. And then, before she could react, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her forward, forcing her to look him in the eyes. "Did you ever love me?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Helen's breath hitched. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough for Samuel to see the truth, enough for him to know that what they had, what he had believed they had never been real. And in that moment, something inside him shattered for good. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, and then, in one fluid motion, he let go, watching as she stumbled backward, her balance slipping, her arms flailing as she teetered on the edge of the boat. Her eyes went wide with realization, with fear. But before she could catch herself, before she could plead, the inevitable happened. She fell. The splash was deafening against the quiet vastness of the ocean. Helen surfaced almost immediately, gasping for air, her arms thrashing as she tried to steady herself. "Samuel!" she screamed, salt water mixing with her panic. "Help me!" He stood at the edge of the boat, looking down at her, watching, measuring. The power had shifted. For the first time, he was the one in control. "Did you ever love me?" he asked again, his voice carrying over the waves. Helen coughed, struggled, and reached out toward the boat. "Samuel, please!" she cried, desperation creeping into her tone. But Samuel only skewed his head slightly, considering. And then, just as calmly as before, he reached for the throttle. The engine roared to life. "I guess we'll never know," he murmured. And then, without another word, he turned the boat around, leaving Helen behind as she screamed his name, her voice swallowed by the endless sea. And just like that, the honeymoon was over. Trust is the foundation of love. It's the invisible thread that binds two souls together. The unspoken promise that no matter what, you will be each other's safe place. But when that trust is shattered, when betrayal seeps into the cracks, what's left? For Samuel, the answer was simple: nothing. What began as a love story built on promises of forever unraveled into something unrecognizable in just 3 days. The discovery of Helen's infidelity wasn't just a moment of heartbreak, it was a revelation. It exposed the lie he had been living, the deception that had existed long before their wedding vows. And in the aftermath of that betrayal, something inside him changed. He wasn't just a man scorned, he was a man who had been played, his love taken for granted, his devotion reduced to nothing more than an afterthought. His decision to leave Helen behind in the vastness of the ocean was not just an act of revenge, it was a declaration, a refusal to be the victim, a way to take back the power that had been stolen from him the moment she whispered, "I love you," with a heart that was never fully his. Some might call it cruelty, others might call it justice. But in that moment for Samuel, it was the only choice that made sense. Helen had made her decisions. She had chosen to keep one foot in the past while stepping into a future she never fully committed to. And now she faced the consequences of those choices, not just in the chilling waters that surrounded her, but in the realization that the man she had deceived was no longer the same one who had once loved her without question. This story is not just about love and betrayal. It's about the weight of choices, about how a single act of dishonesty can unravel years of trust, about how sometimes the greatest wounds aren't inflicted by enemies, but by the people who once held our hearts in their hands. And when those hands let go, some falls are unforgivable. Because in the end, trust isn't just given, it's earned, and once it's broken, not even the deepest love can bring it back. And for Samuel, what later happened to him? Of course, the law doesn't forget. He was later traced and sentenced, but he had no remorse, for he claimed to have done the right thing. Now, here's the real question. What would you do if you were in Samuel's shoes, faced with undeniable betrayal just days into your marriage? How would you react? Would you confront your partner, walk away, or would you seek revenge just as Samuel did? Let us know in the comments below. We're curious to hear your thoughts. Betrayal is a test of character, and trust, once broken, is never easily restored. But relationships are complicated, and not every story ends the same way. If you want to explore more shocking twists, deep betrayals, and the psychology behind love and deception, be sure to check out our next video, subscribe, and click here to dive into another gripping story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust and loyalty. And remember, sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know the least.